kiss for you.
I'll start off by saying this. At $80 a game, you have to convince the consumer that this game is worth more than any other game that they have ever bought. And you have to do this each time one of these $80 games gets made. This is quite different than a lot of other kind of upgrades in terms of price because this is more than any other game currently on the market. It is not like, oh, we're getting flooded with $80 games all of a sudden and you can pick and choose. No, this Mario Kart game, at least so far, is the only game being priced at that $80 price point for a new game. And so the you here is the company, it is a friend, it is you yourself having to convince the consumer, which in this case is most likely the person buying it, or you, that this game is worth a lot. And I think a lot of people kind of brush that off. They're like, oh, obviously this is where the industry is going and all that. But there is a form of kind of judgment that comes about this. For me, at least when looking at a game, I'm like, is this worth the money based on what the concept is? Generally speaking, I believe that, a concept, for example, Battle Royale, right? The concept of a Battle Royale game is a lot of the time free. Things like Apex Legends, Fortnite, all that are free Battle Royales. And so when you have one that's paid, it has to do something different to justify that it's paid. A lot of the time with some unique mechanics, Hunt Showdown, that kind of thing. But the concept of a Battle Royale can't work in a $60 or $70 price tag. And so what I kind of define as games being worth it is really these two sections here, right? Games are either more expensive to make and thus cost more to buy if they have certain licensing things. For example, Forza Horizon series, licensing different car models and real life things. GTA 6 would be here as well for licensing music and music tracks and brands and that kind of stuff. You can charge more for that because it costs more to make. Right, you have to spend more money on these licenses in order to be able to get them for the game, so you could reasonably expect these games to be more expensive. The other side is games you can charge more for because they are unique. Dynasty Warriors, for example, is a series by Koei Tecmo that's relatively intricate and unique in its gameplay, and that's something that no one else kind of strives to do, and so you can charge more. Dynasty Warriors is a $70 game. The Warriors games tend to be $60 or $70. And that is obviously quite high for what they are because they are that unique spin on it. I would also argue GTA or Rockstar games could kind of fall into this category as well. But those are, broadly speaking, how you end up getting to the higher end here, right? $70. Is you either have a licensing thing that requires the game to be more expensive, you have a uniqueness that requires the game to be more expensive because it's in a niche, or you have both, right? And at $80, you have to now convince yourself, like the new Mario Kart game, right? You have to say, okay, is this game worth more than the sum of its parts? Is it worth more than just a Forza Horizon version of Mario Kart, right? Does it have anything unique that may push it over the edge that's worth the extra money? And so that's kind of a conversation that I think not a lot of people are having. They're either brushing the price off completely, or they're like really kind of defeated and saying, oh, okay, now everything's gonna be like that. I kind of take it as like, okay, I'm looking at it. Are there any licenses or anything that increase the cost? Is there any unique mechanic that's like, oh, I'd only find that in Mario Kart? And at least from what I've seen from the footage that's being shown, there isn't. And so to me, it's not going to be worth that $80 because it's not in these two camps. It's not something that is either very expensive from development or something very unique that I couldn't get anywhere else. So for me, I would probably skip out if it was, $80, which is what it is when it's separate. Get to that in a sec. The next point I want to make is that I primarily play these games this system, the Switch 2, in handheld mode. I enjoy it in handheld mode. I primarily play that. I don't primarily play it in dock mode. I think if you, like me, are going for a handheld device, that the hardware itself is fantastic, and I'm going to be getting it just to play stuff in handheld mode. However, if you primarily play your Switch in dock mode, I would suggest not doing this, buying this system yet, because you could buy something like a PS5 for cheaper and have more value out of it if you primarily play it in a stationary mode. Same thing, relatively speaking, if you're just interested in first-party Nintendo games. I think for a system like this, if you're just interested in first-party, it's a little bit too expensive right now, especially with that $80 pricing. That's probably going to be staying pretty stagnant. But if, like me, you are planning on playing both first-party and third-party, I do think I would recommend the system because it has a lot of those advancements, and you can see a lot of your previously used Switch games running at better frame rates and resolutions and that kind of stuff. And that's kind of, I think, where part of the confusion comes from, and obviously a lot of it is from Nintendo not explaining this, but the pricing and everything here really comes down to personal decisions by each development team of each game. From what I understand, I started making this before all this pamphlet was public, and it does appear that most of this is correct, but cross-gen titles are going to be about $60 on Switch and $80 for the Switch 2 edition of these games. And maybe $90. I think this $90 price is just for the European physical. There's no confirmation of the US having that physical currently. It seems like the US physical is still the same, but for Europe, for some reason, it's more expensive. Obviously, that's going to depend on your region, but right now it seems to be that cross-gen titles on the original Switch are 60 and on the Switch 2 are going to be 80. Upgrades are quite important. The upgrade packs for Switch 1 games determined as Switch 2 games are probably going to be about 20, and that does appear to be true from the prices we've seen so far. If something like Mario Party Jamboree TV, or Kirby Forgotten Land Starcross Worlds, if they include new DLC for these games, like those two games do, then I think an extra $20 is fine. But if they don't, and they're just like visual or frame rate updates, then I think that is quite disappointing. It also is worth noting that the the Zelda games that do appear to mostly just be visual improvements, are included for free if you have the expansion pack for NSO members, which includes the N64 games and all that. So you don't have to worry about paying for that. The other thing that I am mentioning here that I don't think a lot of people are taking into consideration is that I don't think a lot of third-party games are actually going to be doing this kind of upgrade pack thing. And my main justification for that is basically, I'll use Koei Tecmo as an example. One Piece Pirate Warriors 4 is a game that does not run well at all on Switch. And basically my kind of question is, why would they bother charging, let's say $10 to create an upgrade pack for that game to boost resolution and stuff for Switch, if they can instead just sell the new Dynasty Warriors Origins game for $70 and port it to Switch, right? So to me, it would seem like, okay, they're not going to bother doing this for a 5-year-old game that not a ton of people play on Switch. They would much rather just port the new current Dynasty Warriors game on Switch for $70 instead of bothering that. And so I think a lot of companies are going to do that instead, where they're either going to not bother with a patch for the older games or release the patch for free, and instead bank on you buying the most current version of what they're offering, in this case Dynasty Warriors Origins, for full price $70 on Switch instead. I think that's probably what they're going to do. That would make the most sense to me. Atlas is another example, right? I would think that something like SMT5 Vengeance would just automatically have all those boosts to it, but they're going to try and sell you Metaphor, right, on the Switch whenever that comes out. So I don't expect a lot of third-party games to actually be charging for it. Again, this could be speculation on my part, but I believe that most third parties will probably give you free patches if they do need patched. Also important to note that, very critically actually, you don't need to have bought the upgrade packs for these games to be able to play Switch 1 games on Switch 2. Things like Jamboree and Kirby and the Forgotten Land will still be playable on Switch 2 without the upgrade. It is, however, unknown at this point whether that means that they're just going to be the standard Switch 1 games or if they will have some improvements. Nintendo's a little bit spotty on what games can see improvements just by normal back compatibility without any patches whatsoever. So that's still to be seen, but it does appear that at least some games will get improvements, just generally speaking, without needing to do any of that. If we go to here where it talks about the Switch 2 edition games, it does say this is available only for select games. I don't think this is going to be a wide rollout. I think this is just basically, hey, any games that are quite popular that we can add new DLC to, like Jamboree or Kirby, right? We're going to do that and charge you a little bit extra for that. But most other games, I would think, that are like, Pikmin 4, for example, or Mario and Luigi Brothership, or things like that. I don't suspect those are going to have Switch 2 editions. I would suspect those patches are probably going to be free. And so we'll go through an example here. Metroid Prime on the Switch, let's say it's $60. Metroid Prime Nintendo Switch 2 edition. We don't have a pricing for this one yet, but judging by the pricing of the other ones with added features, it's probably going to be about $80. I don't think the physical of this is going to be $90, so we'll just move that over to the side. This point here is obviously a pretty big one, and that is game key cards. A lot of people have been very concerned that game keys are basically just digital only, and you're paying extra for physical and not even getting a physical. From what I understand, from what I see, most of the key card here are just the standard ones that were the same, so as previous Switch options. So like NBA 2K, for example, was like 80 gigs or something crazy on Switch. They had that as a digital download. You pop the thing and it downloads digitally. This is basically just an official name for what that was doing, and I don't suspect most games, especially first-party ones, are going to actually do that. This is basically just, as I said, a key card, like a physical verification. So you'll pop that in to your Switch, and it will just say, hey, we're going to download this, check to make sure that's a real copy, and then download it. I don't suspect this is going to be for most things. For example, the most recent Cyberpunk on Switch 2 did confirm that they're going to be fully on the cart. It comes on a full 64 gig cart for the Switch 2. It's going to be $70, include the DLC, and it's going to be fully on cart. So that's obviously important to note. So most games are not going to use this, but it's just a note basically saying, hey, some games might use this, right? So that's just obviously something that's important there. And really what this all comes down to is understanding that the only game we currently have that's going to be $80, that's an actual like Switch 2 exclusive, is Mario Kart, the new Mario Kart game. I believe, like everyone else is saying, that this is $80 so that they can sell more of these $500 bundles of the Switch 2 for a limited time. Again, this ends in like fall. But I believe the reason this is here so that this bundle is, extra $50 for the game versus it being separate for $80. It's just to convince people to buy this bundle. And I suspect it's possible that they may do something like what they did with Jamboree, which is substitute the price by giving you like a year of NSO for free or like included, right? Or maybe even reducing the price past $80. I suspect that $80 is just to cover any costs of the game, and then they might actually reduce it. And I think they've done that for a couple games, at least to some capacity. And so it's not unreasonable to expect that, at some point they may juice this deal a little bit once a year has passed and they've gotten all these shipments out. So that's basically what it is to convince people to buy this thing, they're going to make this a little bit more expensive. And the reason I say that is because it's pretty obvious that Donkey Kong here, which is another flagship title that they're selling, is $70. And so my kind of justification before all these prices were kind of solidified was that the flagships, the things that are going to sell a ton, like Mario, like Kirby, that kind of thing, are going to be $80. The non-flagships, the ones that are maybe a little bit shorter or a little bit less intense, or maybe might not sell as well, will be $70. And so that's why I actually hope that Metroid Prime here isn't a 60-80 deal, it's like a 60-70 deal. Even though kind of the justification for that is the things that are actually more expensive, which we'll get to in a second here, the ones that are actually more expensive tend to actually have benefits to them. As you can see here, Jamboree is going to be $80, but that's because it includes Jamboree TV in extra mode, right? And just visual enhancements or just things that like aren't necessarily DLC, I think would probably be a $10 upgrade instead. Obviously, we're still waiting to see how far that tracks in terms of like how that method kind of rolls out, if it's consistent across the board or if it's kind of per game. But I do suspect that Metroid's probably or should be about 60 for the Switch version, 70 for Switch 2 version, because it's not really a flagship title. If that's not the case, I am going to wonder what the methodology is for doing this, because it doesn't really make a ton of sense that things like Donkey Kong and Metroid would be qualified as non-flagships, but Mario Kart be qualified as flagships. I would assume things that are going to sell 10 million copies are going to be, the higher $80 price, and things that are definitely not going to sell 10 million copies are going to be on the lower end. We'll obviously have to see, but I think that's kind of where it's going to go. You'll obviously notice here that now we can finally start talking about cross-gen. All this preamble basically to say the prices are what they are, but I do suspect that a lot of the outrage when it comes to upgrade packs is mostly just down to the incorrect messaging, and that most of the upgrade packs that do cost money are going to be for additional DLC or expansion content instead of actual just pure visual enhancements, right? Which we'll actually get to talking about a little bit more in a sec. But so cross-gen, at least from what we've confirmed so far, is going to be $80. Now, why are cross-gen more expensive? I originally thought before all the info leaked out that they were going to be more expensive because the Switch 1 versions were going to be like $60, the Switch 2 versions were going to be $80, and that you wouldn't be able to play the Switch 2 versions on the Switch 1, similar to how Sony does it with PlayStation, right? If you have, for example, like a PS5 version of a game, you could not put that PS5 version inside of a PS4. Right? Like you would try it, it just wouldn't work. You wouldn't be able to put that disc or that digital download into the PS4. It just won't operate, even if that game had a PS4 version. That is not what this actually is. So this theory that the idea that cross-gen is more expensive because The Switch normal version lets you play on both the Switch 1, Switch 2, and the Switch 2 versions on Switch 2 doesn't appear to be correct because of what they say here. Let me just increase that a little bit. They say the Nintendo Switch 2 edition of a game is a bundle that includes the original game, assumingly that means you can play it on Switch 1, and its upgrade pack. The upgrade pack enhances the game to take advantage of the capabilities of the Switch 2 system, and it's available only for select games. Now, when everyone saw this originally, they were very confused because they were like, oh my god, we're going to have to buy an upgrade pack every time we want to take advantage of the Switch 2 stuff. From what I understand and from what they're showing below here, that's not the case. Select games that have what a lot of people are calling like a native Switch 2 version will be $20 more expensive and require the upgrade pack, but generally speaking, it doesn't look like that's the case. As you can see here, Nintendo has already confirmed that these Switch 1 games will receive a free Switch 2 update to take advantage of more features. A couple of them stand out: Super Mario Odyssey, Pokemon Gen 9 games, both Link's Awakening and Echoes of Wisdom that had very big problems. I suspect this list also grows. And so I would say a lot of these first-party games aren't going to have a Switch 2 version that you have to buy. I think it's mostly just like games that, as I said, are getting updates of some kind. You could even argue that the Zelda games here are getting improvements with these Zelda notes. You could call this kind of DLC. It is separate and not really that useful, but it is, I would say qualified as DLC in terms of it's not just, improving stuff. It's actual like new content, if you will, right? So I would say that on top of these being free for expansion pack members, that this does technically include DLC. But the ones that are just visual improvements, I would also suspect may get a patch for free. But that's just important to note that, it isn't just that every single, like, Odyssey is great, Mario Odyssey, right? You're going to pop Mario Odyssey maybe day one or maybe a week after, whenever it gets the patch, and it's going to run considerably better. It's going to run maybe at 120 frames. It's going to look better, right? Higher resolution, maybe 4K, and that's it. You don't have to pay for anything like that. It's only on specific ones, and I think that's going to be down to the developers on whether or not they want to go through this, if they have DLC to sell, right? Now, the last point here on that is, well, okay, Kirby and the Forgotten Land's a great example. I have Kirby and the Forgotten Land. I was waiting for the Switch 2 version of the game to run a little bit better. It is releasing with DLC. This is about August, end of August. The Switch comes out in June. So that my big question is, I have Kirby and the Forgotten Land. This Switch 2 edition, which again includes the upgrade pack, does not come out until August. Am I stuck playing Kirby and the Forgotten Land on my Switch 2 with 30 FPS and the lower visual quality until this releases in August? Am I effectively time gated because my Starcross World expansion here isn't ready yet? Am I not going to get the updated visuals and stuff until August, even though I can totally do it on my Switch 2? It's just the DLC. Are they effectively time gating or locking the improvements visually for this DLC? Because that would be very annoying. If they're like, hey, remember Pikmin 4 and you want Pikmin 4 to run better? Wait until December when we release the Pikmin 4 expansion that you can now update Pikmin 4, right? That feels kind of ridiculous if that is how it goes, and you're not going to get any update until the August, a couple months later, when they actually do that. I'm hoping that's not the case. I'm hoping that if they do decide to do Switch 2 versions of things in the future, that you can just buy the upgrade pack and get that benefit right away. I really hope it's not, hey, you can upgrade and you'll have to pay for it, but we're not going to let you do that until the DLC comes out. That kind of feels pretty ridiculous. But overall, I would just say that I do kind of, I definitely don't like the fact that these are $80, and I would definitely absolutely prefer it's lower, but I'm not going to kind of assert that everything here is awful because of that. I do think that, I'll give you a good example. I do think that GTA 6 being $100, if the rumors are true, is a understandable price, considering I think that game's going to have both a lot of licensed music and brands, as well as unique mechanics that kind of justify its billion-dollar price tag, for example, right? Obviously, not every game's going to do that for every person, which is why I think that starting with something like Mario Kart is a very odd choice, because to me and what I've seen, this game, it does not have anything super crazy about it. From what I can tell, from what I've seen of the Treehouse info, Mario Kart is not this this impassable feat of engineering. It just looks like more Mario Kart. There's obviously like the Forza ability to do like open world ish stuff, connected races and things, and it looks very good from what I've seen from the treehouse footage, but it doesn't look extraordinary. And I think the final point I want to end on here is it's really hard. Let me just go back here. It's going to be really hard and really interesting to kind of justify the price of, you have $80 for World here, right? Let me just go back. You have $80 for World here, right? And then you have the old Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. And this game is like frequently on sale for like $30, right? Not a lot of money being spent on this game. A lot of the time it's like bundled in for free. People kind of just give this stuff away. It's not a big deal. One game at, $80, and the only thing you can say is, oh, it's the new game, right? And then you have this game, let's say it's 40, let's even say you buy 60, and remember there's a booster course pass that's like 40 more courses or something for 25. You can buy this game, Mario Kart game, plus an additional DLC for less than the price of this new game. And the only justification, these are both Mario Kart games, they both do Mario Kart things, is, oh, this one is an open world racing thing, right? You can go between the tracks and stuff. That's not very convincing to most people. No one's going to be like, oh yeah, that's worth double the price, And I wonder if maybe that's a tactic to continue the sales of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, is be okay, if you can't afford the new thing, the old thing still works. It's possible, but it's really that justification of, I'm a parent or I'm a consumer in general and I'm looking at this, and you have to convince someone that this new game is worth literally double the price of this old game, or the same price with the DLC added. And from what I've seen, it doesn't look like that. And that's kind of at least where my justification happens, is if this game is $80, it needs to be Mario Kart 8 Deluxe plus the DLC level of content. I haven't seen that many tracks. I haven't seen the battle mode, or if there even is a battle mode. I've seen that the off-roading stuff seems relatively interesting, the connected tracks and stuff, but it's not something that's going to convince me that, yes, I need to spend more money. Again, we'll go back to the top here. More money than I've ever spent on anything for this game. Every single time. For every game that's $80, that thought's going to be running through my head of, is this game worth more money than I've ever spent on any game? And I think a lot more people need to be having that conversation. Some things it will be, GTA 6 being $100 will be a justification that a lot of people will make because, oh, it has, these things that are super unique, or I haven't seen this in any other game, or it's so big that it must have cost $500 million, and so it justifies spending that money, right? Metroid Prime 4 does look very good, but it also isn't one of those where I'm like, wow, this was an incredible, monumental effort by so many people that it's worth spending that much money on it, But again, that's just my opinion. But to kind of wrap it back up here, cross-gen ends up, I feel, being more expensive because it's trying to get people into this idea that these Switch 2 games and the advancements that they are worth more than anything else you've done. Because you've bought, presumably, games for the Switch for $60, and you're seeing how much better they operate here and how much new features there are, and a lot of people are like, yeah, I'll pay $20 to upgrade every single game I have, and they have like 7 Switch games that are going to do this, and they upgrade it. All of a sudden, that person has spent $140 on games they already own, and improving that. But to them, they see, Pokemon running like crap at 60, or Pokemon running very good at 80, but the only difference between that is buying the 60 and $20 extra. That helps alleviate that problem. They're probably going to do that, right? That's the issue with this model, but it's also one that I think is pretty smart on Nintendo's part to be like, hey, remember that old game you played that didn't really run that well, like Link's Awakening, for example, remake? It was kind of rough. Pay $20 or $10 if it's just visuals. It's upgraded. It's fantastic now on your new system. A lot of people are going to do that because a $10 or $20 purchase isn't a lot. An $80 purchase, that's a lot. So cross-gen is more expensive because they can convince the consumer that $20 is significantly better deal, considering they paid $60 originally for a game like Pokemon here that doesn't run that well. So like, oh, I can pay an extra $10 or $20 more and get it running really well. That's awesome. I think that's generally how the consumer is going to think. They're not going to think, oh, it's $80. They're going to think, wow, this game isn't running great. Can I make it better? And the answer is, oh, just $10 to make it better? That sounds good, So I think that's why cross-gen is probably going to end up being more expensive than some of their non-flagship stuff, like Donkey Kong or maybe Kirby or Metroid, that kind of thing. So there's that. Obviously, this isn't great, but I do think that, given time, especially as consumer habits change and stuff, people are just going to be buying less games in general, especially if they're like $80 or $70, and that will allow people to finish more games. Obviously, again, this is not a good thing, but I do think that, especially with consumer habits changing, that it does kind of make people a little bit more contentious and a little bit more thought put into what games you actually want to buy, right? So hopefully that was interesting. Hopefully you found something like that here. I made this giant chart. Hopefully that was kind of a decent way of explaining this. If you want more of this stuff on the channel, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, do all that, and I'll see everyone in the next video.